Matt, it is good to see you. And you are on the podcast today because you stumped me. And one of the things that I've said, if you have any question related to leadership, culture, revenue, execution, those four pillars, leadership, culture, revenue, execution. If you ask me that question, I can point you to an episode of the podcast where I've brought on a guest or I've talked about it. And you happened to ask me two questions that I had not answered specifically on a podcast or brought someone in to discuss. So making good on my commitment to everyone. If you have a question related to leadership, culture, revenue, execution, you ask that of me, I will point you to an episode where we've recorded on it. And if we have not recorded on it, I will make sure that we record an episode on it. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Hit me up with the first question. What was the first question you asked that I could not point you to an episode on?
So the first question I asked, and this is only because I've probably gotten this question 5 times in the last, I would say month and a half. Okay. And it's, when do you leave a company, or when do you know when to leave a company? Okay. And the second one was, how do you handle a boss or a leader you don't like?
Yeah. Sometimes those things relate. Are directly related to each other, right? So I think they're interesting questions. How have you been responding to people when they ask when do you leave a company?
So to me, there's two things, and I've been through this before. I mean, I'm sure you've been through this before too, but there's two things that I always ask. And I think the first one is, your leader or your boss, do you respect them? Are they actually helping you grow and kind of getting you to where you want to get? Because I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
Because whenever I was picking an organization, I was always looking like, who am I working for? And like, how can they help me? And do I get along with them? And can they get me to where I want to go? Right. So I almost looked at that more than the company, although that's a big part of the company. The second one, though, because let's be honest, if you've worked long enough, and especially if you're working at a bigger company, you're always going to have like probably a boss or somebody that you don't like. And it may only be for a period of time, but we're both, from sales background, but do you actually like and believe in what you're selling? I think is a big one too, because I think bosses come and go, but if you don't really believe in the value that you're selling, I think that takes a toll on you too. So those are the two questions I kind of ask people, but curious of your thoughts on those.
The key questions that I've got around this when it comes up, specifically on the, how do you know when to leave? Have I learned everything that I could learn in this given role? And we've seen this happen in sales roles, where someone might have 30 years in sales, but really what they have are 3 years, 10 times over as an SDR, or 3 years, 10 times over as an inside account executive, or 3 years, 10 times over as a new person, customer success. I know customer success is a new term now, but we've had implementation success for a while. We've had people who have been in these roles. So the question is, am I just learning the same things over and over and over again, or am I actually building new skills? And one of the things I realized, took me a while to realize this, but I realized it a bit late in my career, is that I've always hung around places a bit longer than I needed to. And where it first hit me was about 2.5 years after I'd left UPS. Sean's born, and I bring him down into the operation to go see the airplanes, because I used to work on the ramp, and it's kind of cool when you're a little kid, you get to see these big airplanes and they look larger than life, and they're moving packages around. And when I got onto the ramp and walked him up to the door and we're looking at the airplanes, I realized, and you could hear the chatter on the radio from the supervisor that was next to me. They're dealing with the same problems that we were dealing with 3, 4, 5 years ago that were driving me absolutely nuts. And all about trying to get packages into the airplane a little bit faster so that we could get the most amount of volume on the aircraft, or not miss any packages, still get an on-time departure, move people around, do it in a safe manner, with the right weights, all of that kind of stuff. And it just was orchestrated really, really well. And it was really cool to do it. but it was a stressful thing that was happening on a daily basis that when you step away from it, you realize, holy crap, I was really stressing out about a lot of things that were completely outside of my control. Now, there are certain things that are inside my control. We put the right systems and process in place. We do the right timing. We train people well. We organize around when things are supposed to be delivered, the times when trucks are supposed to be at the airport, the times when other aircraft are supposed to land, all of those things, it all gets orchestrated. But sometimes stuff happens that's just outside of your control. And then you've got to be comfortable making the right decision at the right time, in the right moment to optimize for whatever the thing is that you're prioritizing. I learned all of that. I just kept learning it over and over and over again, and really could have left UPS a couple of years earlier than I did. So that would be one thing. Am I learning? Am I growing? Am I continuing to improve? I think you hit on another one that's super important. Am I excited about the problem that we're solving for in the marketplace? Does it get me fired? Is this the thing that I should be doing because of X, Y, or Z, whatever it is? If I'm not getting fired up, then am I just kind of buying time and just going through the motions? And so I'm not growing, I'm not learning, and I'm not making the kind of impact that I want to make. And there's a 2x2 that I use when I'm talking with people about these kind of things. And one of the 2x2s, a lot of people are familiar with the Eisenhower matrix and urgent versus important, and that's decision making relative to time. One that I use for this specific question is energy and impact. So does the thing that I'm doing suck the life out of me? Does it draw energy away, or does it give me energy? Does it fill me up? That's on one axis. And then on the second axis, I look at impact. Is it low impact on others, low impact on self, or is it high impact? Is it actually moving the needle? Is it changing things? If I'm doing things that are high energy, low impact, it's okay, because I'm filling my cup back up and I'm getting energy, refilling myself for that next thing that I'm going to work through. But if I happen to be doing things that suck the life out of me, whether they're high impact or low impact, I've got to find somebody else to outsource that work to, because there's somebody who's the opposite of me, who gets high energy out of putting together spreadsheets, or high energy out of working through financial statements, or high energy out of painting walls in a house, or whatever the thing is. So you can find the person who gets high energy out of the thing that sucks the life out of you, and now you found a partner for life, or you've been able to transfer some kind of a thing over to that person. So that's how I think about that part. What do you think?
I mean, I just heard Tim Ferriss talking about what he does. You listen to that podcast, I'm sure you've heard him before, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But he's talking about what he does on a yearly basis, and he does it, I think, on New Year's Day, right? Okay. He looks at everything that he does, everything he did over the past year, and however he tracks everything. And he basically puts it in two columns. It's basically just what you were saying. It's like, cool. Did I get energy, or did this, I don't know if he used suck the life out of me, but he used something similar. And then he's like, okay, well, I like doing these things. I don't like doing these things. So I'll just go do more of these. And as simple as it sounds, it's true. And if we almost think back to even the topic we're discussing of like, should I stay or leave my company? Is it really as easy as, do I like what I'm doing, and do I like the people I work with? I mean, because when those two things are the case, it's not work, right? But on the other hand, when they're not, it really is work,
And if you're making the impact that you think you're having, so like, let's say I'm constantly doing high energy things that are low impact, I might not be able to optimize for cash flow.
Right.
So I'm not going to get paid very well for those kind of things. But if I can find things that are high energy, high impact, those are things I can optimize for. Those are things I can actually trade really well with, because if it's high impact, it's high value in the eye of the beholder, or high impact on others. Now, if it's high impact on self, that's a little bit different, because you're not necessarily paying yourself, depending on where you are in your career and how things have evolved. But when you look at things on this 2x2, I think the thing that Tim loses if it's just putting it in either one of those two categories is the understanding of, is the work that I'm doing making a difference to others? Is it impacting others? And I've not heard the episode where he talks about it. The other thing I would highlight, actually recommend, is evaluating this every 90 days. Don't wait until January 1st to go through and do it.
Right.
That's just a date in time. Like, we all operate in the context of quarters. Well, most of us operate in the context of quarters. We're familiar about working in the context of quarters. And we can start to look at different things that you can change inside a 90-day sprint relative to your life. Let's look at the work that we're doing every 90 days. And I do that inside the business. I evaluate, what is it that we're working on? Where do we want to put time, energy, and attention? What kind of organizations do we want to work with? So I challenge folks who are listening to this to look at this in the context of 90-day sprints. Because once you know, you can start to make some effective decisions about, hey, is it time for me to move forward?
Yep. No, I agree with that.
Why do you think people get stuck going through the motions? Kind of stuck like I did, going through the motions at UPS, where I was there, super excited about all the work I was doing, really passionate about it. I would go in and work crazy hours during peak season, would be completely drained, be a jerk at home because I just didn't have the energy to hang out with Jen, and my hours were all over the place. Why do people get caught in these traps of doing work that may or may not energize them, or may not have impact, and struggle with making a decision to move forward?
I think it's routine, right? I think it's easier to stay instead of go look for something else. I mean, looking for a job is not really fun. It's just not, especially, and it's hard too, right? Like, look, we always think, oh, it would be better somewhere else, but then heck, you could leave somewhere you were comfortable with and doing well, and then you go somewhere else and you're like, oh my God, like, I got to basically start all over and do something that, like, a lot of people don't like the unknown, right? And if you have something that's known and a paycheck that's coming in over and over again, it's easy to say, I mean, it's always easy to say, oh, I'll look at something next year. And then next thing you know, it's 3 years later and you're like, oh my God, I'm still here.
Yeah. And this is why the 90-day sprint thing, I think, is important for folks, is if you set a reminder to evaluate it, you can avoid falling into the trap of doing this thing. And this comes from Jim Collins. It comes from Jim Collins' Foreword to the Effective Executive, which is the Peter Drucker book, to stop what you would not start. And if you're constantly asking yourself this question, if given the choice, would I start doing it again? If given the choice, would I join this organization again? If given the choice, would I work for this leader again? If given the choice, whatever, if given the choice, would I do it again? If the answer is no, it's time to find something different. And I know that Tim Ferriss, he'll have, I think it's Derek Sivers was the person that he had on, who said, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no, or something like that, right? So the same kind of thing. If you would not start it again, stop. There's no reason for you to continue to do it. Now, a lot of that is driven by the type of decision that we're talking about. Like, hey, if I wouldn't have kids again, you can't just stop. Like, you can't cut them off. You got to get to the point. I'll joke about that because one of mine just turned 18 this weekend, and the other one turned 21 today. So they're kind of moving to the point where they're evolving out. There are some decisions that you literally can't just stop because you wouldn't start it again. But employment, the work that you're doing, that's one that you can. It may take a little bit of time, and then you can start to put the pieces, the stepping stones in place, the plan to help get you from where you are today to where you want to go. But first, you got to realize, this is where I want to go. Then I understand where I am. But I think that question, if you're looking through all the work, if you're evaluating this, saying, hey, this sounds super easy, Mike and Matt, it's not. We understand it's hard. Go through and ask that question. Does it give me energy? Yes or no? Does it suck the life out of me? Where does it fit on that continuum? Is it making an impact? Low impact, high impact? If it's not making any impact, I would suggest stop doing it. Would I do this again if given the choice? Would I start doing this again if given the choice, given everything I know? If not, stop. And by framing these questions with those criteria, this through a specific lens, you can improve your decision making, or at least start to simplify the way that you go about making some of those decisions.
You made me think of something there.
Awesome.
And I love Jim Collins. And I love that. Like, I love Good to Great. And I mean, he's just like, I heard him on podcasts. He's just an amazing like person to listen to.
Yeah.
But what I started thinking about is when you're in a situation where you're just kind of going through the motions, like I think this happens in relationships too, where you're like, oh, if this could just happen, or oh, if this could just happen, it'll be so much better. And like, I just need to get to this point. But like that point usually doesn't come. You know what I mean? And it's like when you look at sports teams, like, oh, if this just would have happened, it's like, nah, but it didn't, because it was never going to happen, because it just wasn't the right like situation. Yep. But we love to like almost like trick ourselves to think, you know, I'm in the right situation, couple things just need to fall my way and I'll be fine. But it really is not. It's like if you've ever dated the wrong person, you're like, oh, if I could just change this. Well, you haven't. You should. I just saw a great video Ed Milet did. I saw it on TikTok, and the point was like, you can't change the person, but you can change the person. You know what I mean? So
what do you mean? Okay, you can't change how the person acts or responds or their character, but you can change the person that you're actually engaged.
Yeah, and you did the same thing I did. I'm watching this video. I'm like, what's he talking about? I'm like, oh, I know exactly what he's talking about. But just everything you went there through, like, because you can talk yourself into, oh no, it's not that bad. But I always think about this on like the change the person and that. So at the second sales company that I worked with, that was a startup, that we grew from, I mean, we were there 0, and then we got to about $10 million in revenue a year in about 5 years, right? So we were successful, grew about 150% year over year. But you've been with startups, and as things go, right, the people that were there kind of, I don't want to say get pushed out, but they just kind of, you know, they're not right for the position anymore. You know, and it just happened. And the fit for me in a position is so important, and especially, you know, leading sales teams before, because there's certain people that just aren't meant for the position, you know? And I used to see people not beg and plead to stay at that startup, because it was almost like the FOMO that they thought they were going to miss some huge $1 billion exit. But the truth to all that was, when they left and went somewhere else, every single person was better at the next spot they were at, because they found a better position. I just think fit, and like going back to Jim Collins, a lot of what he talks about in Good to Great is like, if you can find the right people and put them on the right seat on the bus, those are the companies that, you know, take off. It's not trying to, you know, fit somebody into a place they don't, you know what I mean, fit. Yep. But we do that with ourselves and with our people all the time, because we don't want to, you know, feel like we fail.
Well, as you're talking, one of the things that came to mind is the whole idea around we make decisions based on emotion and then justify them with logic, right? And I like to think that I'm pretty logical. Not to the point where I have pointy ears and people are calling me Spock, but there's logic that goes into each and every decision. Well, but that's not the reality. Like, I was playing golf this weekend. I made some poor decisions on the golf course that were illogical relative to my current capability and the lie that I had and all of those things. So we will make these decisions based on emotion and then try to justify them with logic. And I forget who said that originally, and we'll find it out and incorporate it into the show notes. I think the other question you probably want to ask yourself when going through this process of determining should I stay or should I go. It's, am I justifying? Am I working my way to justify, you know, what I did to deserve to get hit, or why they're going to change at some point, or how they're going to stop drinking, or any of these things? If I'm sitting there justifying the situation, I'm not being honest with myself about the impact that I can make, the thing that I want to accomplish, the thing that fulfills me, the impact that I can have on others, like all of those things. So am I justifying? If you're out there justifying, then you probably have already made the decision. And I would also suggest that somebody inside the organization likely sees it, and they may be in the process of making the same decision on your behalf. So let's hit on the leadership piece, because these all tie together. You can read a lot of books around leadership, and they will have all kinds of perspective, and everything will sound good. Leaders will present themselves as good leaders. The story I like to use is, you can drive down the street and wave at your neighbor every day and everybody smiles. And then you can stop at their driveway and have a couple of drinks and everybody's good. You might even go into their backyard and have barbecue and things are really good. But the moment that the water main goes out your house and you've got to move in for a couple of days, you realize there's a whole load of crazy that goes on inside that household. When you realize that whole load of crazy that's going on inside the household is the reality, don't try to justify your decision on why you went over there when your water main broke. They were helping you out in a situation. Get yourself out of that situation and be comfortable with the idea of moving forward. And we've already mentioned Dan Cockrell once, so why not mention his grandfather, Admiral Payne. His quote is, "Do your best and forgive yourself." So in that situation, you do your best relative to joining the organization, making a decision, making effective decisions, bringing on clients, whatever those things are. Then make a decision and move forward and forgive yourself for making a mistake. It happens. So when you're around poor leaders, know that you can't change them. To use the Ed Milet thing that you had mentioned earlier, you're not going to be able to change them. You're not going to be able to shift the way that they think about leadership. You're not their leadership coach. They probably don't have a coach if they are a poor leader. So don't think that you're going to be able to go in there and fix them. What you can do is you can fix the situation, and you can exit the situation and move out. Now, I would recommend, though, that you take some time and reflect deeply on, is this your perception of the issue, or is it actually their issue? And what I mean there is, are you leading yourself effectively? Are you putting yourself in the best position to lead self, take ownership for all of the things that you're responsible for, you're accountable for, that are inside your control? If so, then you've now earned the right to shift into leading another person. And then when you're working with that person, that leader who's supposed to be leading you, or you think should be leading you, are you leading together with them? If not, then are there certain things that you could do differently? Or are there certain things that you don't understand? So just ask some deep questions as you go through, because sometimes you might have your own blind spots that you created that are getting in the way of you perceiving them as being a poor leader. And the reality is, they might not actually be a poor leader. It might be the relationship that you have with them. On the other side, they could actually be a shit leader, and it's time to move on.
There's so much to unpack, because
Unpack. Let's go.
When you're in a leadership position, there's just so many things going on, that like you don't realize until you're in the position, and then you thought about like what you thought about your boss before. You're like, oh, well, geez, I didn't realize he had all this on their plate. You know what I mean? Like, no wonder he was like short with me here, short with me there. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but I talked to somebody about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was an account executive for 28 years. And I can't think of the companies that are offhand, but they're 3 like big organizations. I think one was Workday, one was Dell, and then I can't remember the other one, but it was big, right? So he's had every different type of manager you could ever have, right? Sure. And I asked him the question, I'm like, what did you do when you had your bad boss? Obviously, you've had a great run here, but and you've had. He's like, oh yeah, I've had horrible bosses. I've had great bosses, but it took me 10 years to figure this out. And he said, I treated him like my client, and it almost stopped me. I'm like, that's funny. I try and tell leaders to treat their team like your client, but like you make a good point. And he elaborated on it, and he said, I looked at how they operated, what they needed, what they were, how they were, and then he goes, I was just really proactive on it and just stayed ahead of it, and I helped them however I could, and that really it worked whether I had a good or a bad leader. And I thought to myself after that conversation, I'm like, imagine the world where the leader treats their team like a client, and the team treats their leader like a client. Like that would be a great culture, because everybody's basically looking out for one another. But I had never thought about it that way, but I thought it was a great answer to the question.
It's a powerful speed bump or perspective shift.
Yeah.
I think you brought up two words that I think sometimes get confused. What's the difference between a manager and a leader?
I've heard this question before. I'd be interested to hear what you said on it. To me, I mean, a manager would basically just manage tasks, and a leader would actually lead people. But to me, that everybody should just be a leader, and that's my perspective. But you go ahead on that, because I hear this all the time.
Okay, so what's the best one you've heard all the time? Like what resonates with you, and then I'll give you my perspective. But I want to go a little bit deeper. Like, so break it down. Manager or man. So let's actually define management. What is manage? What does it mean to manage things?
Like manage, to me, like if you were just gonna manage a team,
Yep.
right? It would be just managing the tasks that people need to get done in order to get the job done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I see it, right? To me, a leader actually is growing people into where they want to go. I mean, in the simplest way, that's how I define it.
Cool. Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to look at it. It's a healthy way to look at it. Like you can manage tasks, you can manage projects, you can manage time, you can manage resources, you can manage whatever money, you can manage all of these things. You're managing things as they operate with each other and they continue to move forward. So we're managing it as it moves to the next step, or we're managing things through the process. There's a level of control that happens there when you're managing stuff. Leadership, on the other hand, is, and I go back to Chuck Schluter, a retired colonel, who this was his definition. Actually, what he did is he said it wasn't as much a definition. It was more about what do leaders provide. Leaders provide guidance, direction, and motivation. So direction, and a retired colonel. So there's going to be very focused here, right? So direction, where are we going? Like what's the thing that we're aiming toward? Guidance, how do we kind of keep things aligned as they're moving through the processes we're getting from point A to point B, or point A to point Z, or wherever it is that we're going? So guidance, direction, and the motivation. How do we draw things out of people that helps them be a better version of themselves? How do we draw things out of people that helps them accomplish more than what they thought they were going to be able to accomplish? What do we know about people relative to the things that get them motivated or excited to do things? I mentioned playing golf this weekend. Will and I were playing golf this weekend. One of the conversations I had with him is about, what kind of what gets him motivated. He likes the arm on your shoulder, everything's going to be all right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to work through this kind of thing. Me, I like to get just pissed off. Like I can get really, really focused when I get angry. I put a ball out of bounds on the third hole, which was really like our seventh or eighth hole in the tournament. And then we went on a run. After that, I just got mad. It wasn't even an out of bounds ball. It was in the rough, lost in play, and had to go back and re-tee. The reason I share this is people are going to be motivated by different things. And if we understand what are some of the strings that we can pull on people to help get them into the best place, now we can help them do something that they never thought they could accomplish on their own. And sometimes we allow our vision of capabilities to be limited by certain things. They're limited by preconceived notions. They're limited by expectation around skills. They're limited by a number of different pieces. One of the things Matt will talk about frequently, and make sure you're following him on LinkedIn, small things lead to big things. Small wins equal big wins. And we'll get into the details behind this. And he's getting ready to pull up the sign.
My sign was in a different spot. It's usually
Small,
right here.
It's small wins equal big wins. So what can we do with our team from a leadership perspective, or self from a leadership perspective, to create those opportunities for those small wins that can ultimately create some really big wins? And so that's what I think of when it comes into this whole view around this kind of leadership and management piece. Management, we're managing processes, we're moving things. There's a lot of knowns. There's maybe a lot of math that we can apply to the thing. Leadership is a bit more of the intangibles. It's the how do we observe? I think there's some coaches that are great leaders, but I also think that there are some coaches that are just crap leaders out there. Coaches who are really good at helping people do the specific task that they need to work through from a technique perspective, but they're not the ones who are going to help them be kind of a better version of themselves longer term. So that's how I look at the distinguishing between the two. What do you think?
Well, I think the best leaders would be a mix of both, because I love that quote that you had from who was that? The general, which is direction.
Leaders provide guidance, direction, and motivation.
Guidance, direction, and motivation, right? And I'd even go back to your 90-day sprint, right? Looking at things, and I like looking at things months and quarters, right? But I think 90 is a good check in. But one of the big things I think the small wins versus big wins is so important is, like, if you're leading a sales team, right? Everybody's got an overall number. I think we would agree with that, right? But, like, how are we going to get there? And it took me way too long to learn this, but, like, it's a math, depending upon what KPIs you need to do, what are the small little things you need to do on a daily basis that equal this, right? And some people are good at some and some people are good at others, but it's like figuring out, like, who's good at what. And, there's some reps over the years that I could pull in a room and get mad at, and that wouldn't bother them at all. Like, they actually needed that. And there was other ones that if I did that to, right, they're going to completely shut down. Like, I always think of, when I think of great leaders, coaches, I always think of Phil Jackson, who coached the Bulls and the Lakers, who coached Jordan, Pippen, Shaq, Kobe. Just think about those four guys and how different they all are, right? Dennis Rodman, throw him in there. But, like, he would get to learn and understand his team and what pushed people's buttons and what didn't. Because think about all the sales teams you've had. Everybody's a little different. And how do you, push the buttons? But, like, the direction and, like, how we're going to get there. And then, like, looking at the different stages and seeing, like, all right, where is the breakdown? How do we fix it? How do we coach on that? But, like, I just think a lot of people they skip that little small stuff and then wonder why they don't hit the big stuff.
Yeah. We get so busy running from task to task to task that we lose sight. Are we actually moving forward? Are we making progress? Are we making a difference? And I think one of the quotes I want to be known for and share often is, speed to impact is more important than going fast. Yes. Everybody wants to go fast. We all want to go fast. We want things to happen faster, and we wish that they would happen faster. The question you've got to ask, though, is, are we actually accelerating speed to impact? Or when we back up a bit and we look at all of the stuff that we're doing, are we just working really, really, really hard and really, really fast? Or are we making progress? And if we're not making progress toward the goal, Like our activity numbers look really good, but we're not actually getting to the quota numbers that we have or the targets that we've said that we're going to deliver or whatever the thing is, then we have to reevaluate whether or not the work is really working. And it gets back into these two questions, two questions, as I know my numbers. And this is, I'll go back to my Arizona State University education as I threw up three fingers. But the questions that we're talking about here, one, how do I know when it's time to leave? You won't, like you might make a mistake. I can tell you this, I never left a job too early. I've never gone back and said, hey, I wish I would have just hung around for a couple of more months or years or whatever. I have left roles and have been exited from roles in time periods where I could have actually left those roles a little bit earlier, given what I've learned. So I don't think you ever leave, and Matt mentioned it, I don't think you ever leave too early. So if you're asking the question, it might actually make sense for you to start putting the systems and processes, build your plan out to go out and find that next role. On the leadership side of things, what do you do with a bad leader? I think the feedback that you got on that one is on point. If you can start looking at them in the context of customers, both internal and external customers. We have customers that we work with, and the cool thing about customers is they have problems, not problems that we manufacture, but they actually have problems. They have challenges that they're working to solve. And if we understand the challenges that they're working to solve, then we can start to determine, are we the right fit to help them solve that thing? And if the manager or leader inside the organization, the problem that they're trying to solve for is they just want their reports to look a little bit better when they report up to the board, and they're not really super interested in developing a team, and they're not into you and all of those other things, and they're not into solving the problem inside the customer base, and they're actually doing more of their work to just avoid some of the stuff that they're doing at home, then they're probably not the right leader for you, depending on where you are inside your career. And you're not going to fix something. Like that's not your job. Your job is not to fix the leadership inside your organization. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lack of leadership inside many of the organizations that are out there.
100%. I actually just thought about, I don't even know if I should tell this or not.
Matt, it's just between you, me, and everybody else who's listening. So go ahead.
But I have a friend that I talked to, probably he worked at the first company I worked at, which was only for 4 months. So but it, we've kind of kept in touch, and I talk to him every once in a while, and he just kind of goes from role to role. You know what I mean? Because he kind of knows how to play the game, and you know what I mean? Because you can figure out how to play the game every once in a while. But the company that he's working for right now, he's like, oh, we're owned by private equity. He goes, nobody seems to care about anything right now. I'm just trying to, ride this out as long as I can. My boss never even says it. He just I think part of it is understanding too what type of company you work for, and just understanding what it is, learn how to play the game and do that. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but some people are okay with that and some people aren't, and figure out what you like and go do it.
I think it just comes back to that whole stop what you wouldn't start. And if that's something that if you're comfortable doing that, you'd start and do it over again, then just keep going. Just know the game that you're playing. Greg Head says this really, really well. And he's talked about this a couple of different times about, knowing the game that you have signed up for. When you take on venture capital, there's the game that you've entered into. If you're taking on investment from private equity, there's a game. These are different. Those are two completely different games with different metrics that you'll use to evaluate success and timelines, etc. Know the game that you're playing. Don't get pissed off inside an organization that plays hockey when you really want to play football. You're not going to change that organization. So, and it's arrogant of you to think that you can. So be comfortable moving on. But I think the key and the theme over the course of the conversation that we've had today really is you're in control. You have an ability to make decisions. In order to make those decisions effectively, you have to be honest with yourself and be open to evaluating your decisions through a couple of different lenses to help reduce the risk of making a poor decision. And even when you make a Poor decision, it's okay. Move forward. You can move on to the next one.
I'd like to cap that off with this if I can get through it. Is that, the small wins equals big wins comes from my brother who passed away about 2.5 years ago, right? And I'll go back to private equity for a second. Like I signed up for something that I didn't really know I was getting into one time, right? And I used to talk to my brother every day, almost every day on the phone, because he was in medical sales and always in the car. And he knew that this job was just not the right fit for me, right? And he said to me one day, and it's not like I bitched about the job all the time, but he just kind of could tell that I was, you know what I mean, wasn't in the right spot. And he said, why don't you go do something else? He's like, life's too short to, you know what I mean? Like, just be it somewhere that you don't like, or it's like not a fit. And I don't know how much later that he passed on after that, because it was within a year. Right. But if you're out there sitting there struggling, take that lesson from him. And it's there's always another job. You're going to make money. Go do what you want to do. And I always wanted to start my own thing, right? When I exited my first startup, and I just didn't do it. Right? So did it take his passing for me to do it? No, I think I would have done it anyway. But, I always think back to that conversation and think, yeah, those were wise words.
Share another story. What's another story you can share about your brother relative to the conversations that you would have, or the things like what kind of maybe guidance on how he would answer the questions you asked today? How do you know when it's time to leave? And what do you do if you're working with a bad leader?
I think he was always smarter than everybody else. You know what I mean? He always, so he played Division II football. He was an offensive tackle. So he was a big guy. He was 6'3". I think at his high, it was probably around 300 pounds. Okay. Right. But wife will still tell stories about he knew every play, and he helped these people, and he, you know what I mean? He did people's homework, and he did all that, you know what I mean? So I think when I think back to the way he thought about life, was that it all just was just kind of like a game. And you know what I mean? Nothing to him ever seemed like a big deal. You know what I mean? Where if you and I would get mad over losing a ball in the rough or this or that, he played golf barefoot. You know what I mean? Nothing ever really seemed to bother him. And I don't know why that was, right? I think he always might have known he had a weaker heart, because he had some issues with it. And I think he thought, hey, I'm going to be here for as long as I'm going to be here. I'm not going to take life that serious. I'm going to be the life of the party, and I'm going to enjoy life. Right. While, the rest of us stress out about all this stuff. My dad used to have his book that was, you've probably read it before. It was don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. It's when I think about my brother, I always think about that. I'm like, geez, I was the oldest, and he was probably 7 years younger than me. And, we don't have him anymore.
Why do you think we sweat the small stuff?
I don't know. I think about that all the time. When you flip out about something, and then 20 minutes later, it's what? Why would I do that? I don't know. Why do you think?
Yeah, I think I've been doing a lot of thinking around this lately, and it kind of gets into this whole piece around where we get, and I'm in the process of getting attacked by the dog. But I think we're all so busy going from one thing to another, to another, to another. We forget to ask the question, why are we here? What do we want to accomplish? Who do we want to serve? Who are we as people? I think the Stalensky's questions, and this is an iteration of them, and the Stalensky's questions come up in The Art of War, which is the Pressfield book. Who am I? who am I here for? Why do I believe in me? And coming out of the National Speakers Association event that I was at earlier this year, the questions I was asking myself is like, what am I known for today? What do I want to be known for? So I know current state versus desired state. And who do I want to know me? Like who do I want to attract and who do I want to be attracted to? And I think these are questions that are super hard to answer early on in our career because we have no freaking idea. And if you get into a situation where you're constantly doing the same thing over and over and over again, so that 3 years of experience 10 times over, a 30-year career doing the same stuff, then do you ever really know? Do you ever really get to the point of being able to figure out, like, who am I? Why am I here? Who am I
I
here for? Like it. So kind of pull that together. What I think is we're busy moving from one thing to another, whether it's from Twitter to LinkedIn to Snapchat, Threads, Instagram, or whatever, or work. We get so focused, overly focused on activity data. How many calls did we make? How many emails did we send? How many click-throughs did we get our thing? We get so caught up in these things and we forget to ask ourselves, like, what impact am I making? Why am I doing this? What's important? What's important to the others that I'm around? These deeper reflective questions. And if we get ourselves into a situation where we can pause, take a moment, evaluate what it is that we want to do, who we want to do it for, why we want to do that, we can get ourselves into that quadrant that Covey and Eisenhower talked about. It comes from the Eisenhower matrix, that quadrant of things that are important and not urgent. And we start getting out of a reactive state and move into things that are a bit more proactive. So I think we could go all Jerry Maguire here and say fewer clients, more meaningful relationships. Like there's a reason why these stories resonate with folks. And I think the other thing I would add into this is with all of the information and all the noise that's coming around is we're overfed and undernourished. So we've got so much stimulus and so much information, but we're not finding that meaning. And that's why golf is so important to me. Being able to go out and walk the golf course is important to me. When you're figuring out ways to gain more of those experiences is important to me. But it's really, really hard, especially early on in your career when you've got to make money and you're in the process of building a family and you're doing all of these things and you want to build the house and do all of that other kind of stuff. And you're chasing those other things. But yeah, I think we just have not given ourselves, we're not comfortable. We're not comfortable in the quiet space where all we have to do is work through the thoughts that are between our left and right ear. And if we can find more comfort in that space, then I think a lot of the other stuff will start to come together.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was, I like born and raised in this startup where it was like you need to go as fast as possible and then pivot and as fast as possible. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but it's just I'm a go fast and figure it out on the way. Like what do they say? Build the plane on the way down on the crash,
Yeah.
But the more I go through stuff and it's like, all right, let's take a step back. What do we have? How did we get there? What's the best way to, grow? You know what I mean? And just execute what you're trying to do.
Well, I think you hit on a key point there. It's like we've got to go fast, which we do. Speed to impact is more important than going fast.
Yeah.
You still have to go fast. And if we go fast, we can learn quickly, we can iterate, and then we can accelerate that speed to impact. We can realize, are we going fast in the wrong direction? So Matt, let's talk a little bit about what you're working on. So what are you working on today that gets you super excited?
So I love sales math, basically.
Okay.
The reason that I love it is because I was proved wrong by it so many times early in my career. Okay. And my mentor, who's still my mentor today, when I used to get upset, it'd always be around money or like my team's only going to make this or this is only going to make that or, whatever. Right. And I was emotional. He is very unemotional. right? And he would just step back and be like, how much money do you want to make this year? And I'd tell him the number, and he'd be like, well, yeah, you're going to be within $1 or $2 grand of that. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm like, well, let's bet, and we'd bet, and I'd lose every year, and it's just because he knew the math and the numbers behind the business.
Yeah.
Okay. Then he left, right? And then I was left to, help run the company with the CEO that, I never really had a relationship with, who was kind of engineer life, and everything with him was black and white. Okay. And I'll never forget, we got off to a slow start one year, and he comes in and he's like, all right, what's the number? It's like January 8th, right? And he's like, hey, what's the number going to be on March 31st? And I'm like, we're looking at each other like, what? He's like, what, you guys don't have the math figured out on how to do this? He goes, well, go ahead and figure it out. And we did. We got it figured out, and we got it dialed in to where we could get within 5% of the number, over a period of time. But it just was always so interesting to me, that something that I had no idea with. And then, when you learn sales math, as you know it, right? It's amazing what it can show and the holes it can find.
Yep.
Right. Into how to hit numbers.
Right.
And I'll tell you the reason that question has come up, right, is when I'm working with people, and let's be honest, there's a lot of people that miss their number in Q2 this year, and people are struggling with, overall numbers this year. But like, I just do the math with them and look at their team and their numbers, and I'm like, well, of course you guys missed their numbers. This math is all wrong, And then that's kind of so, geez, am I working for the right company? I never realized it was this off. And so long story short, I work with either sales reps or sales managers, right, with figuring out sales math, and then how to manage your team off of it, or how to manage yourself or your manager off of it. But that's what, like, if you look behind me, like, that's what I have right here. Like, I'm just always fascinated by the math.
And a lot of what folks struggle with in revenue roles can be solved with math. The challenge, and why you want to work with someone like Matt, is the challenge is, my math is not your math, but you've got to figure out, what are your variables inside your organization? What's the math that makes sense for you, not the math that makes sense for 6 other organizations out there? Because if you're trying to apply their math in this instance, and this is why you want to work with folks like Matt, he will help you find your math, not leverage everybody else's math.
Correct. Everybody's math is different. Everybody's is different. This is actually one of my favorite examples back here, because it shows how less than a 2% increase in your connection rate. And this is a person that's working with a dialer, like they're an outbound organization. Okay. But it's less than a 2% increase in just your connection rate. It has nothing to do with if you can be better at booking meetings, because I already have his percentage, right?
Yeah, right.
He could just get his connect rate up by making his list better. It actually equates to 91 more meetings a year. And when you show people this, but you literally, I had to show him a couple times. He's like, wait, can you go through that again? Because that doesn't, but that's the stuff that's so exciting for me, is when people see that, because so many people want to coach people into being better sales reps and better discovery and all this. And I'm all for that, right? But a lot of times just showing people the numbers and seeing like, oh, if I just focused on this, that actually increases the number way more than like really improving somebody's skills, which, by the way, that's very important. But the numbers a lot of times will just fix the problem just based on people doing the right thing.
And in order to know that, you have to know your numbers.
And you have to know them inside and out.
Yeah. Matt, where's the best place for people to connect with you?
LinkedIn's the best place for me. Just go to my homepage, send me a DM if you're interested.
So check out Matt on LinkedIn. If you know somebody who would enjoy this conversation, please share it with them. We covered a lot of range. Like there's a lot of stuff in here, whether we're talking about when's the right time to leave a job, what to do when you've got a crap manager, crap leader? How do you evaluate whether or not that crap relationship is actually on your side versus on their side? You know, what more can you do on your side? Really like the discussion on the importance of application of math inside your organization as you look for ways to improve how and optimize how you're approaching the market and the work that you're doing. Share this with someone. Let Matt and I know via LinkedIn. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?